Thank you. And I must say, James, this is the most exciting conference I've been to. So thanks for putting it together and having me here. So a lot of things that you see here, you probably heard from people earlier in the day. And I also realized that there are things in here that are missing that were also mentioned earlier, like customer service and user education that Claire touched upon. My job is product management, and so when I started thinking about this, I wanted to talk about how do we design a product and how and what are things that we should keep in mind when we start building a product, rather than think about it later when it's too late. So Patrick touched upon this earlier today, where he had this really cool chart which had a Venn diagram where you have normal people and then hackers and nerds. So when we're building a product, we want to think about the value that the product is providing. And the basic question that we want to answer is, does the product deserve to exist? It may be really cool for us to build a coffee mug that keeps track of how many cups of coffee we're having in a day and send us a text or something when we've had too much. But if it costs $1,000, who's going to buy it? Or a rice cooker that costs $600 is probably too much. On the other hand, a product like Lively that I find interesting personally is it helps seniors in a non-intrusive manner to keep track of their medicines, or to remind them to go outside the house or to eat food even. It will improve their lives, it will improve their health. Those are things that are really exciting. And so a product would succeed in the market if it has something of value to offer. It could be anything. It could be a function or a service, or even entertainment like a toy. But it has to, people should want to have it. It solves a problem for them, or it makes them happy, whatever the case may be. And Claire just talked about really in-depth about a well-designed user experience. So this falls into the category of people wanting or needing things. And I know that I want a Nest Protect, even though a Nest thermostat, even though I have a perfectly good functioning thermostat at home. But I don't want a 3-inch smartwatch that will look really ugly on my wrist. I would never buy it. So when we're designing products, we want to think about the target audience. So taking the example of a watch again, is our target specific factions who may like big bulky watches, or is it everybody? So if it's everybody, we want to do user experience tests with different audiences that we are targeting. Another thing that we want to keep in mind is that with the Internet of Things, it's not necessary that we have screens, right? So if we're designing software, you're used to having the software run on a screen or do something. But I mean, slapping a screen on a fridge where you could read your tweets may not make sense, at least to me. And the other thing is, I've talked about 5 senses here, but I want to also add motion and other sensors here, but keeping in mind that what is the experience we are trying to give to the users, and leveraging the physical things that they can touch and see or maybe smell or whatever. Those are the experiences that we want to think about when we are designing, and not just the visual part of a screen. And finally, I think this one is very, very important, is that it should be easy for someone to use. And again, Claire talked about this a lot, is that there are things that are in the market that will not be successful because they are hard or they're too expensive. So these things we need to keep in mind about when we're designing the product. Now that we've solved the problem of the users needing to buy a product, how should we stay in business so that we can sell the product, be in the market, be successful, make lots of money, whatever the case may be, solve world hunger, whatever your goal is. And so these are some of the business models that I've come across, and I think this list will grow over time. It may not even be complete today, but here's what I see. And free is not bad. If you have a business that will cover the cost of free. What I mean by that is, for example, this is not an IoT example, but I'm just saying, Apple giving away its OS for free because it makes money on the devices, so it can go negative on the operating system and make the bulk of money from its hardware or other devices that it sells. So if you're designing a product that you can give away for free but make money elsewhere, it makes total sense, so that people can, it's easy for them to get started with your product. The other business models are providing the glue, so making money from selling the sensors that you put in your product, or the hardware platform that you use to build your product, or the software platforms that you use to develop the software that goes on these devices. Device sales is a very obvious one. Software sales, again, is an obvious one. Another business model that some of the providers are exploring, cable providers or mobile carrier providers, is they subsidize the cost of the hardware or may give away the hardware for free in return for a monthly recurring fee. And their target audience is people for whom $5,000 or whatever the case may be to set up a home automation system be too much. So they are willing to spend $200 to get started and have the providers help them every month to build rules or whatever the case may be. And of course, build to order is custom homes, custom devices in, or even in the industrial internet. Going into some of the technical things now, when we're designing a product, I think that the API is very important, and we should design a product so that from day one of launching the product, it may be open. We should design the API so that on day one it could be open and public, but it's not necessary that we do make it open and public on day one. Whether it is like that depends on the strategy and the business model we choose. So Nest, for example, launched their product, but they aren't making the API available until next year. They just launched their developer program a few months ago as well, and are accepting applications from developers. But what if they had not thought about ever having an API being made public, right? That creates some challenges, and so the design should include this concept of having the API. The API should be well structured, well documented, predictable, and I'm going to touch on predictable a little bit because this is a pain point that I've seen in the product that I work on a lot, is that people just suddenly decide, the providers, they suddenly decide to change the API and don't bother to inform their end users. And if you have software built around it, it's going to break suddenly, and it could be heating, your system that you control for heating. If it suddenly stops working, you're going to find people getting very annoyed and going down the rabbit hole of figuring out what the problem is. Not talking about how to make things secure, but just things that we should think about when we're designing the products. we should think about protecting customers by default. And so some things we should build into the product that are very, very easy to do, like requiring passwords or reasonable authentication, mediumly strong passwords, or not having ports open by default. Just very basic security measures should be built in with the mentality that we want to protect the end users. They should not have to figure out how to go about it and having to figure out later that their data is out there very open, whatever the case is. So things that we should think about is our product, what are the security measures that we're going to incorporate? How easy would it be for someone to hack into the product? And maybe in this case, we get some contractors who can hack into the product to give us that answer, but we should at least try to have an answer to that. What is the data management policy that we have? And not having a policy is not an answer. Whether you're saying that you own the data versus the user, but the user should be made aware and given the choice of opting in or out, whatever they want to do. What is the trade-off we're making towards making this product secure versus more convenient? And again, our decision should be based on protecting customers by default, but not making it so hard that they don't want to actually buy the product. And again, there was a talk about developers earlier, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but having a developer program is essential towards making sure that the product is continuing to grow. There are things that other people will think about that you have never thought about, whether it's having the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star song run when the temperature is above 25. It makes sense for them because maybe they just don't like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It annoys them, and that incentivizes them to reduce to crank down the heat. But how do we attract developers? Why would a developer want to develop against our product? Whether it's money, free hardware, free thing, whatever it is, but we need to have an answer to that as to how are we going to attract a developer to this program. How do we make it easy for them to develop against it? They could potentially have the ability to monetize it if they want. Otherwise, why should they spend their valuable time developing against our device? Ideally, it should be open, but if not, what is the process for participation? And I find that some companies announce their developer program. IBM recently announced one for Watson, and I was very excited about participating in it. So I went ahead, signed up, no response, no idea what the process is. Did not hear back for over a week, and after a week got a generic email saying that we are carefully evaluating people who are participating, making me think that maybe they prefer people with deep pockets. Whatever the case is, they're not very clear about what the process of participation is. And that turns away a few people. So we should think about that. And ideally, it should be open to both individuals and businesses again, because you don't know where the next cool idea is going to come from. And this is the last bit where everything kind of comes together, is that if we've thought about all these things, we're going to have an ecosystem work with us to make our product successful. So Internet of Things is all about hardware manufacturers, it's about the software providers, it's about the network operators providing us the connectivity. So by network operators, I'll give you an example. You have a watch that could work for kids and allow you to track them. I forget the name of the product, but it was recently launched. But they needed to work out a deal with the providers so that it could work outside of the Wi-Fi network as well. Similarly for home security systems, that should be able to work on mobile networks. And then developers and makers are the key that will actually build a product. And finally, customers are the people that would that are going to buy the product. And so how are we going to build this ecosystem is a key thing when designing our products. So that was it.
Thank you.